video is going to review how to apply properties to justify the steps we use in solving equations. So this should be a really basic review for you of properties that you've been using for several years. So if you consult the properties that are on the back of the worksheet that you were given, that we used in class, you'll see a list of all of the properties. So if we look at the step going from here to here, we want to say, what is happening here? What is the change going from this step to this step? Well, we see that the distributive property was applied. So that's what we would write in this step. Okay, now we're trying to say what happens going from this step to this step. Why does 4x, a positive 4x, plus a negative 4x, give me 0? So what's happening here is we are adding these two things together and we're getting 0. But that's actually the next step. Okay, I was skipping ahead a little bit. Sorry, didn't mean to be confusing. What's happening here is that we're actually subtracting 4x. So that's the subtraction property. Now here is where we want to talk about why is this 0? Well, this is 0 because of negative 4x and a positive 4x add together to give us 0. And that's the inverse property of addition. Okay, all the inverse property of addition is it tells us that negative 2 plus 2 is equal to 0. Something added to its opposite is going to give us 0, and that's exactly what's happening in that step. Okay, going from this step to this step, why do we just have xy in this step? Where did the 0 go? Well, that's the identity property of addition. And all that says is if we add 0 to something, we just get that something back. That's the additive identity. 0 is the additive identity or the identity property. So the last one here is what's called the zero product property. Okay, we had x times y is equal to 0. So then that allows us to say that x is equal to 0 or y is equal to 0. And we've talked about this with factoring when we have x plus 1 is equal, x plus 1 times x plus 5 equals 0. What we do with that is we say, well, x plus 1 equals 0 or x plus 5 equals 0. It's the same thing here, is we're just saying each of those things, one of those things has to equal 0. If this times this is equal to 0, either this thing is 0 or this thing is 0. Alright, so let's take a look at problem number 2. Our first step here is that we're adding 4c to both sides. So that's the addition property. Pretty straightforward. Okay, now why is negative 4c plus 4c give us 0? Well, that's the additive inverse. Okay, we talked about that before. When we add something with its opposite, we get 0. So what is that property? That's the additive inverse property. Okay, we have this one again, 7 plus 0. Our next step, we just have 0 because that's the additive inverse, or additive identity. When we add 0 to something, we just get that thing back. It keeps its own identity. Okay, and here in our next step, we're dividing by 14. So that's our division property. Okay, and the last one I'm going to do with you here is problem number 3. So our first step going from here to here, we know this one pretty well. It's the distributive property. Okay, we have negative 16 plus 16. We're adding 16 to both sides, so that's the addition property. Okay, the negative 16 plus 16 gives us 0, so that's the additive inverse property. Four x plus 0, okay, gives us still our 4x, so that's our additive identity. It kept its identity. And last but not least, we're dividing by 4, so that's our division property. Alright, so for homework, you're to finish this worksheet up, numbers 4 through 6, practicing your properties, and you're also doing numbers 6 through 18 even on the other worksheet that we started in class. Okay, both of these are due on Wednesday, November 6th. Okay, if I have you in, this is for 4th block, and then it's Thursday, the 7th, if I have you in 3rd or 5th. Okay, if I have you in 3rd or 5th, your only responsibility is to do these problems. Okay, if you have any questions, please see me in CAV morning.